everyone, and welcome to Odds Pods. I am here welcoming astrologer Hummingbird, who lives literally on the other side of the globe. And today it is 8 a.m. her time, and it is 7 p.m. my time over here in Europe. And she's in the Pacific Ocean on the other side. It is March 26th, a Thursday. And we are here to talk a little bit about April's astrology and a couple of important transits that are happening right now that I'd like to highlight going into the month of April. So first of all, I found Hummingbird's work probably in 2022, I think, is when I found you on Medium, and you were publishing about the collapse. And I thought, well, that's a pretty strong word to use, what's describing that's happening right now with the U.S. political scene. So I was really grateful to find somebody else who is taking this as seriously as I was taking it. And I wasn't really an astrologer then. I didn't know enough about it. I had only just learned it recently and started studying these transits, in particular to charting what's happening with the Pluto return in the USA. So today I'm super happy to welcome Hummingbird because I have a few specific questions for her that we're going to cover in chat. Hello, Hummingbird. Would you like to say hello?
Hello. Happy to be here.
Yes, thank you. Okay.
My project is Collapse Astrology, if anybody was confused about like the word collapse.
Yes, we're going to do the plugs later on. You're on YouTube. You have an Instagram page. You write and publish on Medium. And where else can we find your work if I left anything out?
That's it.
Okay. All right. So what we're going to do is take a moment and we're just going to ground ourselves and set the intention. The intention for today, moving into April, we're going to be on the axis of the Aries-Libra exchange. And Aries is all about the I, and Libra is all about the we. So here we are cultivating peace. We are cultivating harmony in all of our best interests. And we are also working on collaboration. So if you guys will just set up for a moment, take your sitting bones right to the edge of your seat, and then set up straight, roll your shoulders down and back, close your eyes just so you can kind of like close out the world for a moment. And then part your teeth and relax your tongue in the back of the mouth. Lift up your chin just a little bit and let your jaw fall. Release any tension that you have in your neck. Roll the shoulders down and back a couple of times. And take a big breath. Inhale. On the exhale, turn your head as far to the right as you can. On the inhale, bring the head back to neutral. Slow exhale to the left side as far as you can. Inhale back to neutral. We're going to do it 2 more times. Exhale to the right side. Inhale back to neutral. Exhale to the left. Inhale back to neutral. And just sit here for a moment with your eyes closed, your jaw dropped, the tongue relaxed. Shoulders rolling down and back. Pull the shoulders away from the ears. You can drop the chin down towards the chest. Feel your feet into the floor beneath you. Spread your toes, wiggle them. Press into the heel of the foot, the ball of the foot, the outside edges. And slowly open your eyes. And give your hand a little bit of a shake. And stop light with fingers. We're going to just tap along the chest. Open up the lungs a bit. Take a big breath. And exhale. Okay. How are we feeling? Are we feeling refreshed?
I'm feeling great.
That's great to hear, Hummingbird. Okay. The intention today is really aiming for peace and harmony. And now we know that we live in the real world and not the perfect world. So I appreciate Hummingbird's approach because she is very eloquent with just laying it out as flat as you can get it and as straight from the horse's mouth as you can take it. So appreciating this time with you. Hummingbird, you are a mundane astrologer. Can you tell me and my audience, for people that don't know what that means, what it means?
Yeah, I think a super simple definition is just that it is using the planets to track and map and maybe predict political events and social movements and collective shifts, as opposed to the way that we're looking at personal shifts and characteristics in a natal chart.
Yeah, excellent. And what makes it different than other types of astrology? Let's look at like Western types of astrology.
So you mean as opposed to like natal or horary or electional astrology? Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's mundane astrology takes a very different form now than it did throughout history. Like, it's actually the earliest form of astrology. Before there was even natal astrology, there were political leaders who were asking astrologers to make predictions about when to go to war, or who was the enemy to fight or whatever, based on the positions of the planets. And mundane astrology as a branch of astrology really shifted with the discovery of the outer planets, and starting with Uranus in 1781. So there wasn't really a way before then to track these kind of longer term shifts. Yeah, and I think to this day, it's really the only branch of astrology that is looking at politics and social movements and collective long-term changes.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I quite appreciate learning more about it. I have dabbled, of course, I've learned in the Western astrology world, and I can see how many grifters are out there and how many people really truly are not using the practice as a resource, but they're using it as like a get rich quick scheme. So there's a lot of like shame and hate that astrology gets, and of course the whole metaphysical label behind it as well. You as an astrologer, do you feel like your business is booming right now? Do you feel like there's like a shift and change of people being more open to understand?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. I haven't talked to an astrologer or anyone doing, kind of any kind of spiritual practitioner really whose business is booming right now. I think there was kind of a bubble for this type of business in like 2020, 2021. So, yeah, I think that has more to do with the economy than like how the collective conversation is shifting. But I will say there's been an amazing, enormous shift just, since I started making content in 2018, in terms of people that are interested in political astrology content. Like, people just weren't really into that much a while ago. People just didn't really want to be thinking about that stuff so much. So they're more open to that. And there are so many more people that speak astrology, like at more of an advanced level. So my audience, I feel like my content is pretty niche. It's not for everyone, but it's really amazing to see how many people are around who are not professional astrologers. They may not have even like ever taken a class or whatever, but just through apps, just through the internet, like there's so many people that are not beginners at all. They may come to me for their first reading, but they've been studying astrology for like 5 years, and they, don't need the basics. So that's cool to see. And then, that just also creates a demographic of people that are much more able to have these in-depth, like, political astrology conversations.
Yeah, good point. I think that there is a shift, and I think that's a lot of the Pluto and Aquarius, that people are using different perspectives and thinking with different mindsets now. And you definitely see people that are more open to exploring topics such as disclosure and the aliens. And these aren't topics that we considered outside of conspiracy theories just 20 years ago, right? So I think it's an interesting time to be alive because we are definitely changing over into a new era. And what do you think also, like turning over a new era? There's lots of different theories behind this, but you can definitely see some of these larger outer planetary transits that are making such a collective impact that have less to do with horoscope and personal astrology and individual astrology, and more with these collective societal shifts that we're living through, that we're going through. So, yeah, are there any key planetary players that you would suggest keeping an eye out for when tracking? Let's talk about geopolitical events. For instance, Pluto moving into Aquarius is when we started to see the height of World War III building in this various capacity as we are, because we're just challenging so many of these power structures. And that's what Pluto is here to do: transform, break down, build anew. And in Aquarius, this is a really good thing, but we've got like what, 232 years or something to work it out.
You mean until the next Pluto in Aquarius
Yeah.
comes around? Yeah.
Anyway, what do you think are some of the big key planetary players that we should be watching and that we should be looking at?
I mean, in general, for mundane astrology, just like the outer planets, right? Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are the ones that represent these more abstract and collective energies and influences. And so it's pretty unusual that all three of those outer planets are changing signs within 2-ish years of one another.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime any outer planet changes signs, that does signify some kind of a big shift in the collective energy. So I've been using this term, like you said, like the new era. And it's funny in astrology, right? You can call anything a new era or a new season. You can just kind of make up those terms and how long they last and what it means or whatever. But I do think that there's a feeling that most people are experiencing now, whether or not they're tracking the astrology, with all three of these planets changing signs, or just about to. I think we'll talk about Uranus in just a little bit, but it's three brand new influences coming through at the same time. So I think that really speaks to both the really dark and heavy and scary potentials that are kind of revealing themselves in much more obvious ways, and the exciting and transformative potentials that we're all kind of feeling. It's like a very edgy feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's review, because what you've talked about. So somebody who doesn't know much about astrology, Saturn, it's taking 2.5 years to transit through a sign, and Jupiter 1 year. So Jupiter shifts from Cancer into Leo, and that happens late June, July of this year. And Saturn has just moved into Aries. And those two gas giants, we call them the outer planets, but they're also called relationship planets.
Yeah, I say interpersonal. I feel like it's a middle ground between the personal or inner planets and the outer planets.
Okay, and everything from Venus, Mars, Earth, Mercury, Sun, those are our personal planets, the inner planets, right? Okay, so then from beyond Jupiter, we're looking at Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, right? So Uranus is moving into Gemini, and I believe that happens April 25th this month. And it's coming out of Taurus, where it's been very comfortable since, I believe, 2018. The vibe that we're picking up now is a lot of what we reviewed back in 2018 after some learnings. Now, if we think back collectively, 2018 was really when I started receiving signs from my intuition to tell me something was brewing, something big was about ready to happen. Now, personally in my life, shit was not good. It was definitely not good. And that was the year that I chose to make some really long-term sustainable changes that took me a year to actually action and execute on later. So for me, it was really important. And a lot of that is because I think I do have Chiron in Taurus. Now, Chiron is a different energy, but we also have the shift of Chiron happening this year as well. And Chiron is not a planet, it's an asteroid. Interrupt me if I'm wrong. And I think it's orbiting somewhere between Jupiter and Saturn. And
not an asteroid actually either. Chiron has like very weird crisscrossed astrological or astronomical like characteristics, but it's a centaur planet. So in particular, that means a planetary body that has an elliptical orbit that crosses over the circular orbits of the planets in our solar system. So Chiron's orbit crosses through as close as like Saturn's orbit, but also as far out as Neptune's orbit. And there's a couple of other bodies, Nessus and Pholus, and a couple of other bodies that are also centaurs. That elliptical shape of the orbit is what makes that categorization.
Uranus and Gemini, the conjunctions that have happened historically, for instance, the Civil War, we can definitely mark periods where the U.S. has this Sibley in their Sibley chart natally, right? The Uranus-Mars conjunction.
Yeah, well, it's not a conjunction. The U.S. does have both Uranus and Mars in the sign of Gemini. They're 12, 13 degrees apart.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you want me to lay out the U.S. Uranus return?
Yeah.
Just the basics of that. So, you know, if you consider the United States born 1776, Uranus was at 8 degrees of Gemini. And so Uranus takes 84 years to go around the sun. So the first time that it circled back to 8 degrees of Gemini was the Civil War. The second time it circled back to 8 degrees of Gemini was 1944, 45, end of World War II. Mm-hmm. And so now it's circling back again. The exact Uranus return this time is 2027 to 2028. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot I could say about that, but it does, you know, there's definitely some war-y vibes going on in the United States, right? And so yeah, go ahead. Mars is a whole other interesting piece.
Yeah, well, let's go into that a little bit more because a lot of people in my audience that follow that are interested in what I have to say about what's happening in America or what could potentially happen. And really, it's fair game because astrology aside, everybody has free will and we can all change the storyline and the narrative at any given time. And the reality is we have a regime in place that is unhinged and full of a lot of mentally unstable individuals who are making life very hard for a lot of individuals, not even in America. We're all suffering the consequences of this American regime. However, Mars Uranus makes a conjunction on July 4th. I believe it's July 3rd, excuse me. July 4th is the 250th year anniversary for America. This year is also important. It's also the same period around the Haitian Revolution, the French Revolution. We've got a lot of themes where history is repeating itself, particularly coming up this summer on that first week of July. I just canceled my trip to America to visit my family in Missouri because I was feeling really apprehensive about global travel.
Probably a good call.
Yeah, I don't want to be there with my kids. I don't want to be experiencing that. Now, this is the reality right now. Like America is really parasitic and toxic, and we've got to make some changes, which is great because we have the astrology that shows that we can do that and these changes are possible, but we're going to have to be really fucking brave and super courageous. But that's what Aries is here to do because Saturn and Neptune have moved into Aries. We have a Saturn conjunct. We have a Cazimi today, actually. Let me just look at my...
Oh, yeah.
It's today. The Saturn Cazimi is today with the sun. So today is a perfect day, all about discipline, structure. Here comes Karma Daddy, Big Daddy Saturn, right? And just coming to put us into place. Is there a window within these coming months that you feel de-escalation between U.S., Israel versus Iran becomes possible, where we can actually see less activity on the war front? Do you think we're just getting started?
I will say, I think the transits and the timelines to watch when it comes to the US and Israel attacking Iran are the square between Jupiter and Chiron in July, which could be a time that maybe looks like de-escalation. It will probably look like a time when some amount of pride is lost, some amount of face is lost for some like kind of Leonian leadership. But then I think that it's really key to pay attention to the stellium in November between Jupiter and the South Node and Mars in late Leo, because that is an energy that just archetypally, first of all, it activates Mars and in general Leo for Donald Trump, for JD Vance, and for Netanyahu. They all have these heavy late Leo placements.
Mm-hmm.
And then also with Iran, you have the royalist movement, which is who, you know, who the Western people want to change the regime over to, is the royalists, the Shah, and the symbol of that movement is a lion.
The lion.
So it would be very archetypally aligned if there's a massive escalation with Jupiter, South Node, Mars, and late Leo in November, also around the time of the midterms or maybe right after the midterms. That alignment is like right after the midterms. So I'm, not making any predictions, but those are the timelines that I would be paying attention to.
Yeah. These transits, they definitely tell a deeper story. And you also have to, like, this is a series. I think that the one in July is the third one that happens. I'd have to look that up.
You're talking about Mars Uranus
Mm-hmm.
alignments.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a square, then we have a conjunction in July, then we have another square in December, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's good that we can use these moments to reflect on, but again, because of self-will and free will, and berserko sundowning dementia patients that are leading the world at the moment. Where are the wins, Hummingbird? Where are the wins for like the normal, everyday you and me Americans?
So I talk about the US Pluto return a lot. And Pluto is the archetype associated with metamorphosis, right? And so I love to think of the metaphor of like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. We could think of that for humanity, but also like maybe, you know, for Americans, there's a specific karma for us right now during the US Pluto return. And so I think that the wins are in tuning in to your own unique blueprint that you hold for the metamorphosis. So if you think about a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, goes into the cocoon, all the cells break down, it becomes goo for a little while. There are the imaginal cells in there that have the blueprint of the butterfly. They start to reproduce like in that goo phase. And then eventually this new metamorphosized creature comes out. Some of the cells are becoming eyes, some of the cells are becoming the wings, some of the cells are becoming the kidney or the stomach of the butterfly, right? Not all the cells have the same job, and it doesn't help if like the eye cell tries to tell the wing cell that they're doing it wrong, right? Which is what we do a lot of in activism, unfortunately. So I think that we all are here for a reason. I think that though the times are really dark and hard and scary, like I think that we each do have that our own like blueprint for the metamorphosis inside of us, and this is a really powerful and exciting time to be tuning into that more. I wish I had something more specific, but I hope that's a helpful framework.
No, it is. And I also get that theme. There's a lot of like millennials and Gen X people that are in my inner circle that are super burned out right now. And I don't feel that with the younger generations. Like, I feel like Gen Z, and of course I'm raising teenage girls that are just like, wow, the world is shit. Anyway, this is what we're going to focus on now because that's what we have control over, right? Like, it's going to take a good solid decade to work out some of these themes that we're going through. And I don't think midterm elections are going to happen. I think that there'll be something catastrophic that occurs before then. And then I also don't think that JD Vance is going to be the next president. And I also do feel that Trump is on his way out because he just looks physically so ill. So, and I honestly feel that maybe his death is like a public display of affection for us all. So it might be a moment that unites the country again, because people are really ready for that, but they're not ready for what's to come if Vance takes over. So where my win is and where my personal vision of hope is for America, and given I don't live there, I can easily say this, I think maybe a council takes over and we rewrite a new constitution or make addendums to the Constitution or figure out a new way forward and hopefully start to inject youth. And the only way that we can recognize the fall and the collapse of the democracy is to start this locally in communities. And that also has to start personally, privately, in homes and in people's hearts. God forbid I say that. But we are looking at a revolution that's going to take a good 30 years to turn over a new leaf. And we need at least one generation, the boomer generation, to kind of just die out. So we have other dynamics in the evolutionary cauldron, if you will. And I know that sounds horrible, especially because I'm a person who's nearly 50 years old and my closest friends are all over age 60. It's horrible, but that's the reality. In 30 years' time, we're going to be looking at a different world. I mean, for fuck's sake, I feel like I live in a different world just from like last week to now. The amount of trauma that everybody is collectively processing right now is through the roof. And people don't even know that they're being traumatized by the amount of psychological warfare that we have all experienced just from watching the news. It's intense. So if anyone takes away the message of, we have to really start making changes for the better. And a lot of that is visualizing a healthier reality, a more sane reality, especially for the future of who's going to be living on our earth. I'm not thinking about my parents or my friends over the age of 60. I'm enjoying their company, but they're not going to be here much longer. So I'm really living in the eyes of my children at the moment, which causes me to be a little bit irresponsible at times. Do you have anything to add to that?
I think, well, a timeline that I always consider for like the rewriting of the US Constitution is when Pluto reaches the moon in the Sibley chart at 27 Aquarius. So it's a little longer than 10 years, maybe not so much longer. I think it's like 38 or 39 or something. Wait, did I get the degree wrong? I think it's at 27 Aquarius. So I think when Pluto is like at the end of Aquarius, it will be conjunct that moon. And I think that moon speaks a lot to the Constitution and the attempted, values that were set out there. So I think that transit, like Pluto coming through and doing its transformative thing over that moon, could be a timeline for maybe, America in one way or another. Like Pluto leaves Aquarius in 2042. So it would probably be 2038, 2039, 2040, something like that. Yeah, but I so agree with you about injecting youth like into structures of power. And yeah, it's one of the many like signs of the collapse that we live in this insane gerontocracy right now.
Yeah, it's created this
90-year-old senators or whatever.
I know. Yeah. And it's really shocking because we have the president who stood up there, 10 years ago and was like, we're going to drain the swamp. I'm like, my brother in Christ, you are the alligator in the middle of the motherfucking swamp.
Yeah.
And now people start to see it. And you still have a lot of people that are justifying Trump. Oh, but he was the disruptor. Yeah, I'll give you that. He was the disruptor. So are you ready to rebuild a new country? Because let's fucking go. And let's chase out what is no longer working. And in the previous articles I've written about this and shared on podcasts about this as well, it is all about shedding and letting go. Like, we are moving into the 1 year, the year of the fire horse. It's about go, 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 go. But if we impulsively go, then we're going to end up a mess, right? Or burned out, one or the other. So we've got to find this way to work with Saturn, for instance, to give us the structure, to give us the discipline, to give us containment while we continue to revolutionize and renovate, because that's basically what it is. But you've got to get the people with the power to just like, we got to knock these people down and say, we don't really care about your money, your power, and your greed anymore. It's about killing celebrity culture off. It's about reducing social media influencer lifestyle, reducing capitalism, consumerism. Like, we got to get people to really start to live in a more conscious effort. And this is what's hard. And that is going to take at least a decade to wash through that level of awareness and collective consciousness. Okay. Yeah. For the people feeling overwhelmed by all of this, what do you think astrology has to offer?
I think that we're living in a time when the narratives that we've been fed about our society, what we're here for, what we're striving towards, those narratives are collapsing like under our feet. And it then becomes very psychically disorienting to not have a new narrative to lean into, to not be like, well, what, if I don't believe all this stuff about like America's the #1 country in the world and we're all working for, just improving life everywhere else. If I don't believe that stuff, what do I believe? Right. Yeah. And I feel like astrology, mundane astrology in particular, although natal astrology is also super helpful, understanding your own character and temperament timelines. It's a little bit of like a mediating narrative. It's not the only narrative you need. It doesn't have ultimately the answers of like, what do we do here politically, or how do we resist oppression, or how do we birth the new world? It doesn't have those answers, but it does give you something to lean into that you can rest in terms of like a little bit of an archetypal story of what is happening right now. So you can look at some larger scale timelines, like you can look at the Pluto return, like Pluto's cycling back to the same place it was in 1776 now for the first time. So you can kind of stretch here and you can look at the archetype of Pluto, and you can look at Pluto in the US natal chart, and you can be like, okay, I can kind of see what is happening like on this time scale that's beyond just my individual lifetime. And so many parts, everything about astrology allows you to zoom out in that way. And then the archetypes that as anyone who studies astrology knows, like the archetypes manifest in such like stunningly precise ways. And that is also super helpful to be like, okay, here we're dealing with this archetype of death and rebirth. It's associated with war. It's also associated with the butterfly coming out of the caterpillar. That's really helpful, right? To like start to wrap your mind around what it is we're up against. We're not just up against an enemy that we need to like, fist fight with. Like, this is something much bigger and much more profound than that. So I think, Pluto's just one example. Astrology has so many examples like that, where it doesn't have all the answers, but it can really give you something to lean into. And the brain craves certainty, right? It's easier to stay in a regulated nervous system state when there's an element of certainty. And so the brain and the nervous system freak out when these narratives are collapsing, and when we're like, what the fuck do I believe? I don't know who I am. Yeah. And so you give yourself something to like just drop into, when you have astrology as a kind of framework. I think there's a lot of other frameworks that can help with that too. Astrology is not the only one, but I think that is mainly for me, like I just can't imagine even navigating these times without having the astrological timelines in my head.
Yeah, I'm really happy you said that. And a lot of that ties into my personal story. In 2020, I literally thought I was losing my damn mind. And I was diagnosed with depression at a young age. So already I had access to psychologists and some of the top doctors here in the Netherlands. My psychiatrist that I saw for almost 8 years had just freshly retired, but I quickly ran back and tried to make an appointment because I started having crazy dreams about what was to come. And this was February, March, April, right after the pandemic had arrived to Europe. And at the time I was working in the shipping industry, and my focus was on like volume reports coming out of Asia. And immediately I was like, oh my God, everybody's going to go into lockdown and we're going to become the most hyper consumptuous society ever seen. And that's exactly what happened, of course. And we all became reliant upon tech, and it was just a totally controllable moment for the technocrats to come in and start manipulating. I met with my psychiatrist. I actually was prescribed antipsychotic meds to help with the dreams, because my dreams at the time I was binging on way too much series. Like I was watching Handmaid's Tale, and I was reading a lot of George Orwellian books, and I was just throwing it back into my head and programming my stuff with the worst case scenario. My psychiatrist was like, what are you doing? No, here's some medicine, go to bed, stop dreaming. And then when I pulled it together, like I was realizing that I was setting myself up for a psychosis is what I was doing. And I was starting to see images that actually did play out later. In January 6th, for instance, I kind of was able to see that all in a dream in pieces and fragments. Then I found astrology. I started deepening my practice in astrology. I found a couple of astrologers that I was working with, and I was very particular about who I was working with because I've been burned in the past. Working with people in metaphysical fields, you never know. Like I said, you find these grifters, you never know who you're going to get. A lot of people find resources online. No, for me, it's word of mouth, and I want to know who I'm working with. So I'm really grateful that I now have the knowledge that I do, because it's really put me in a very calm state. And I know that there's going to be moments where we're going to experience bumpy times, of course, but I also, it's so obvious now, because you can say, okay, this is going to be Mercury retrograde is happening, so I know I'm not going to be traveling and agreeing any sort of contractual duties then. You can start to plan your life around it. I work with moons, the new and the full and the 6-month lunation cycles. And this has helped me also with my personal goal planning. After I left corporate, I found it really productive to work with moon cycles to keep me on my straight and narrow and work with my personal goals and like vision boards and all that kind of bullshit. So if anything, I don't think we sounded very doom and gloomy today. We could have sounded a lot more doomer.
I agree.
Yeah. All right. I'd love to welcome you back sometime, and we can talk a little bit more about other things that are bubbling in the air. Look out for random fires that are coming your way, random floods that may be coming your way, random volcanoes that might erupt. Yeah. Do you have anything else to add?
I don't think so. This was great. This was fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, it's great because I definitely want to, I love talking to more astrologers and finding out how relatable and how real that they truly are. And sometimes when you talk to astrologers, you're like, I don't know how I feel about this person, because you have to kind of decide if you really like the message that the interpretation is giving. You know, there's a lot of astrologers out there that are giving a different perception or a perspective that I wouldn't necessarily adopt as my own. So I think it's good that we do use word of mouth connections and referrals when we can. So I'm going to tag your work in my article that I will include in this pod, and just tell everybody, the listeners and the watchers, where that they can find you online.
Collapse Astrology On YouTube and Instagram and Medium.
And you have a free ebook out there that talks about tracking this from like 2018. You show up with receipts.
Yeah, I have an ebook that is a retrospective. So if you're interested in the outer planets, it's not so much about what they're doing now, but what they just were doing, the transits that we're moving out of. I have an ebook that covers all of that. And yeah, it does have a lot of like real world examples.
Indeed. Okay, well, Hummingbird, I have nothing but gratitude for you. I know it's taken a lot to get this in the books and on the schedule.
Yeah, it worked out great.
I'm very these days, but we got through eclipse season.
All in the right timing, yeah. And it's Mercury's finally direct. Like, sure, it's the right timing.
I know. I was really hesitant this last month of February just because I was like, okay, the astrology, the toughest month of the year was projected to be February, but April, these first 2 weeks and into mid-April, we can expect some fiery things to continue. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will end here, and I say namaste.
Namaste.